I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Welcome back to Genesis Does, and today we're looking at Aworg, Hero in the Sky. I presume it's pronounced Aworg, but I don't have a pronunciation guide for Aworg, so we're just going to have to go with that unless proven otherwise. This game was never physically released for Sega Genesis. Don't be fooled if you see it on eBay in a reproduction cartridge shell. That's somebody trying to cash in long after the fact, because this was a game exclusive to the Japanese MegaNet modem. It was supposed to come out for the Sega Genesis in 1991, but since it was a dial-up service, they decided it would not go over well in the United States and quietly canceled the release. It wasn't until much later that the Sega Channel, with broadband delivery, was able to achieve the goals they had set out for the US market. But in the meantime, in between time, Japan actually got to download games over telephone lines to their Sega Genesis, and this was one of them. Now, Aworg is not the worst game, but not the best game either. It's a strange game. It reminds me a little bit of H.E.R.O for Atari 2600, ColecoVision, etc., various early video game consoles, in that your character is momentum based, that you have gravity pulling you down, but you can counteract that by firing your jets, or sparkles in this case. One description I read of it describes them as fans, so I guess that would explain what those things were at the beginning of the game in the title sequence. They were spinning fans, so let's just call them that. You're using your fans to move around these obstacles, but when you fire off the fans that produce sparkles, they can also move certain objects on the screen to get them out of the way, which is kind of tricky because then you have to turn around as you're firing the sparkles and get them to move into the object, even though the sparkles were moving you toward the object. Like I said, momentum based, so it takes a long time to get the hang of, as you can see from my playthrough here. But when I say jets, one of the fans definitely shoots you through the sky like Superman with your arms straight out in front of you. Whatever direction you're facing when you push the button, you jet in that direction. So you can either fire your sparkle fans or you can shoot your sparkle jet. But whatever you use, you've got to go around the screen and collect these various crystals. And when you do, they open a gate, and then you have to get back to the gate and get to the next level. If that was all you had to do, then Aworg would probably be a pretty easy game. There is, however, a catch. The sparkles that you're firing out of the fans, well, that's energy, pure energy. And when you run out of energy, you lose a life. So, in that sense, it's a little bit like other games like Lunar Lander, where you have a limited amount of fuel and you have to land and gain more fuel by scoring points, and if you run out of fuel, you plummet to the ground and crash. Game over. Or Thrust Plus, I guess that would be another example. Solar Jetman. These games all have certain things in common, but Aworg is a more simplistic version of that, and by necessity, because this was being downloaded over telephone lines, so there were data costs involved, long distance involved. You didn't want to spend an inordinate amount of time on the phone getting this game, so they had to keep it simple to a certain degree. In fact, you'll notice that when the game started, there wasn't even a Sega. Presumably that's because the modem would do that for you, so there was no need to tack it on in the software package. And if you want to play it, I'd say go ahead and download it, because it was never sold as a Sega Genesis cartridge. There's only one way this ever got any kind of a physical release. For a brief period of time, there was a MegaNet CD collection in Japan for Sega CD, and this was on MegaNet CD Volume 2. That's the only way you could ever own a legitimate physical copy of it, and I feel like that is mining the depths of obscurity at the absolute maximum. I don't think you should feel too bad about playing a downloaded copy of this game, but you also shouldn't buy a physical copy of this game because that's no different than downloading it. They're just repackaging it and selling it to you, and they're not paying Sega or anybody else for that. So why encourage their blatant theft of intellectual property for profit when you can just play it on an emulator or your analog Mega SG or your Mega Drive Pro, whatever you've got? There are ways you can experience Aworg, but should you experience Aworg? Well, I'm going to argue yes, because even though the controls are difficult to master, and one playthrough certainly wasn't enough for me to become a pro at it, I do like the challenge involved of having to use your energy and resources wisely to collect all the items and get to the goal while avoiding obstacles, enemies, hazards like spiky ceilings, and whatnot. I think there's plenty of challenge to be found here, and even though it's game over when you run out of lives, if you're doing it with an emulator, that's never a problem because you can always go back to a previous save state. And even if you're playing it on a physical media, such as the aforementioned Analog Mega SG, it wouldn't be hard to get back to your previous location because you've already figured out the design of the level and how to conserve your energy to beat said level. So starting over again, even going back to the very first level, wouldn't take you very long. And even though the instructions at the beginning of the game are entirely in Japanese, you don't need to read it because you can pick up and play this without knowing any Japanese whatsoever. So it's actually kind of amazing that they didn't actually try to make a physical release of Aworg, because there are other games that they made for the MegaNet that did actually come out as physical cartridges. Flicky came out, Cyberball came out, but Aworg, H.E.R.O in the Sky, never came out. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time for another episode of Genesis Does.
Genesis does. Genesis